Okay, Dr. Paul Gausman, G-A-U-S-M-A-N, Superintendent of Schools for the Sioux City School District. Thank you for being here today. I'm here today to talk about the fact that we've spent the summer listening, reflecting, and planning to begin this new school year that, of course, will look and feel a bit different. Families that have entrusted us with educating their child on site, that's what I'm here to discuss today, in our buildings will experience a culture with heightened sensitivity to health, to wellness, and to safety. While students will continue to experience the sense of community that a school provides as they come to school on the days that they have class, our enhanced cleaning protocols and new health precautions will heighten student safety. I'm going to mention some of those for you now, and then certainly we'll take any questions that you have. We have put in an initial transition into the school year using our hybrid instructional model, and that automatically creates a sense of social distancing among our students. Since only 50% of our on-site learners will be in a building at a given time, our schools will be able to increase the distancing practices in classrooms, hallways, and community spaces. And I should say, as of this time, when we're talking today, I do expect that about 30%, just under 30% of our learners will be learning virtually as well. So those learners will not necessarily be in the buildings, and then we'll begin with this hybrid model that splits the remaining students in half. Staff supervision, of course, will also be increased to reinforce our practices. As it relates to masks and face coverings, all teachers, staff, and students will be required to wear a face mask or a face shield that covers their mouth and nose while they're on district grounds. Masks are required in the classrooms, when moving throughout the building, during recess, and of course when they're on district transportation. We have put in place a number of cleaning protocol as well. The number and location of sanitization stations and hand sanitizer have been increased throughout the buildings and classrooms. Safety signage has been strategically placed in classrooms and throughout the building to reinforce healthy hand hygiene, social distancing reminders, and reminders about how to stop the spread of illness. Drinking fountains are limited now to bottle filling only. Air ventilation and circulation of outside air into buildings will increase through our HVAC systems. Daily and weekly cleaning protocols are planned using EPA-registered chemicals for disinfection. Desks in classrooms will be disinfected when students switch classes. Special attention is being placed to disinfect high touch points and areas in the buildings. It's important to note that in the buildings where it's possible to do so, we've created one-way paths for students and staff to travel, one-way hallways, those sorts of things. We also have put in some significant illness practices and protocols, as you might imagine. Updated illness protocol and practices have been implemented to assist promoting the safety and wellness of our students, staff, and our community. If a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19, the identity of the individual with the positive result is confidential. This individual will not be allowed, however, to return to school for at least 10 days and 24 hours with no fever without the use of fever-reducing medicine and with their symptoms improving. The Sioux City District will work closely with Siouxland District Health, and they have been a fantastic partner for us. You all have been great partners in helping us to get our message out. They have been great partners to us in helping us to make the decisions as to who needs to be placed into quarantine and for how long. When we work with Siouxland District Health, we establish a list of close contacts that interacted with any individual, staff or student or community member who tests positive for COVID-19, and those close contacts will be notified and directed to self-isolate or self-quarantine and take other appropriate measures in accordance with public health guidelines. Only individuals who are identified as close contacts will be notified about positive COVID-19 cases in the district. Appropriate actions will be taken in every case and in accordance with our protocol to thoroughly clean, sanitize, and disinfect any impacted area, whether that's a classroom, a hallway, a gymnasium, a school bus, whatever it might be. Classes will continue for those who have not been identified as close contacts unless announced otherwise. To help prevent the spread of COVID-19, we're asking that community members screen their child at home before they go to school. We've got a checklist of things that they may look for when they screen themselves or their children because they're coming to the school buildings. We ask them to look for things such as a temperature, body temperature that's higher than 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, and to see if any of the COVID symptoms are present. We are asking that people partner with us in their responsibility to keep students home when they experience anything that seems to be a COVID-19 symptoms. And of course, we ask them to regularly communicate with their school as they work their way through those items of protocol. As an item of closing, before I would take any questions that you have, and I'm going to come right back. I didn't move my right leg, I promise. Still good? As an item, the school board voted to start the school year in this hybrid model for a period of no less than 2 weeks and no more than 3 weeks. We are watching the metrics closely. We're watching the community positivity rate. We will watch student attendance. And it is our expectation at this time that we will use the opportunity to reopen the schools when it is safe to do so in the traditional format. Right now, we're going to work off of what the board has decided. But of course, we have to recognize that our school district is 67 square miles. It's not like some districts around the area, which are also very important, but may only have one building. We've got 25 buildings, we've got 15,500 students, we have 2,500 staff members, and there may be times during this year where it is safe and appropriate to have school in this building or in this series of buildings, yet it is most safe to close this classroom or this hallway or this building for a period of time as well. And so I sense that will be much of what we're dealing with as we head into the fall. With that, I take any questions that you might have.
You mentioned the 30% are about 30% students, learning from home.
Mm-hmm.
Did that affect teacher reshuffling at all? Did the district have to do any?
It did. We of course had to survey our students to see who wanted to learn virtually and who would be in person when we could open. We also surveyed our staff the same way, who was interested in teaching virtually and would be willing to go through extra training, paid training, so that they could learn to teach in a virtual environment. And it worked out pretty well, actually. The percentage of students who are receiving virtual instruction at the beginning of the year and the percentage of teachers who are delivering virtual instruction seemed to match up pretty well so that we could get this year started. And we'll see how that progresses as we move through future decisions on how we'll deliver instruction.
What is the district considering a close contact? Will the entire classroom be notified, or who exactly will be a close contact, whether it's a student or a staff member?
Right, and this is where our partnership with Siouxland District Health has been so strong, and we're so thankful for them and their guidance. We ask a series of questions when there is a situation where someone was either exposed to the virus or they've had a positive test for the virus, and those questions determine who they've been around and for how long have they been in close proximity to that person. Were masks worn, were other protocol in place, and based on that specific situation, we make decisions with the help of Siouxland District Health on who to notify and recommend quarantining. When we're not in the middle of a global pandemic, I'm often asked, what are the exact details that I use to make the decision on when we're going to have a snow day or close school because of inclement weather? And it's impossible because every weather system is different. The same thing is true in this pandemic. I can't give you the exact for every scenario, but those are the kinds of questions and kinds of decisions that are made based on us learning that a student or staff member has tested positive or has been in contact with someone who has tested positive for the virus.
Is what you described, is that contact tracing in essence?
It is contact tracing. Okay. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. Is it possible that, based on what you said, that perhaps one elementary on a certain part of town could be moved entirely to online, where the other 24 continue building some?
Yeah, I would argue, Brett, without a vaccine or some significant changes, it's not only possible, it's probable that you'll see us dealing with a classroom or a section of classrooms or a school building separate from what we're doing with the rest of the district. Did Mandy say something at one point there? Or was it, I didn't know, oh, okay, all right, I'm trying to sense.
In my example, I said elementary, but it could also be a high school.
It could.
Or any school, basically. Yes,
absolutely, and we're watching student attendance because we're watching for absenteeism, and as directed by the governor's office and the Department of Education, we're watching for absences, most specifically related to COVID. 19. But we're also watching that community positivity rate, which the last few days has been running in the 7% range, 6 or 7% range, as I'm sure many of you are aware.
And the magic number is 15%, right? That's the
The State Department of Education indicates to us that we may not move to the virtual model for the district unless we're hitting that mark of 15% positivity rate in Woodbury County, and we consult with them in the Iowa Department of Public Health.
And the state public health website lists Sioux City Community School District as like a 2-county school district, according to the metrics.
That is
How much
correct.
does Plymouth County factor into that?
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers, but the percentage of our students who come from Plymouth County are so much smaller than the percentage, obviously, who come from Woodbury County. But we have to watch and need to watch both of those metrics as we make these decisions.
So hypothetically speaking, for say an elementary student who's in the same classroom all day and they test positive, what's the protocol going to be for the rest of the class? Are they going to have to kind of quarantine themselves? Or
Outline the beginning of that again. I just want to make sure I understood.
Say for hypothetically speaking, an elementary student who remains more in one class and maybe other students, if they test positive, what does the rest of the class look like? Do they have to go through a certain quarantine process as well if they're all been considered close contact?
Yeah, using the contact tracing model, we would discover who was in close contact with that example of a positive student who tested positive. We would want to answer the questions about actual physical contact, whether there were masks worn, what other protocol were in place. And it might be a scenario where a number of students in that room are asked to quarantine for a period of time, and others don't need to, but we lean on the medical professionals for their help and assistance with that.
And Dr. Gosman, the school district is counting Wednesday in the hybrid model as an instructional day because
Correct.
teachers are in the building.
Yes.
The state told me that they're not looking at this as an instructional day, and that Sioux City meets that 50% requirement because it's looked at as a 4-day week. Can you explain the discrepancy in this and how Sioux City's plan does meet that 50%?
Yeah, you're asking me to explain something someone else said, so I'm not able to do that. I will tell you that we have been given permission from the Department of Education to use the hybrid model that we have designed and put in place. The Wednesday in our model is a student contact day in that students have the ability to receive support, interventions, instruction. We're not bringing all of the students into the building on that day, and we have been notified by the Department of Education that the way in which we're delivering that and offering that as a day of instruction meets the requirements of the Iowa Governor's Office and of the Department of Education.
Can you talk a bit about the protocol if a student starts to develop some symptoms of COVID during the school day rather than beforehand, and
Certainly.
Talk a bit about the care centers?
Yeah, so if a student begins to exhibit or communicate that they've got some symptoms that could in fact be related to the novel coronavirus, we would immediately place them in the caring rooms that we've set aside with appropriate staff member supervision, with appropriate personal protective equipment for all, while we work to discover the level of challenge that is there, and while we work to communicate with the home or the guardian of that student, so that in most cases that student may be picked up, and if they choose to go through a series of tests, if they quarantine for a period of time while they're symptom-free, there are a series of protocols that we would work through there. It's important to us that we set aside this separate caring room for this. It's really common in schools when we're not in a pandemic and you have a student not feel well that they go to the office. Well, the office is kind of the hub of the building, and should they have the virus, we certainly don't want to place them there, and that's why we've created these segregated spaces called caring rooms.
You said you spent time with bus drivers this morning.
I did.
Did you hire any new bus drivers or adjust their schedules in any way?
Yes and yes. We have worked through our transportation challenges that exist just because we're using the hybrid model, where we're bringing certain kids on 2 days a week and another group of kids on the other 2 days of a week. And yet we do know that we'll move back to that traditional schedule. When we do, we can't put as many on a bus as we once were able to do, and We also use a few city buses as a partner to us in delivering students to school, and they've got regulations, proper regulations on their routes as well. So we've had to bring in more transportation professionals and had to rework our routes in numerous ways. And we believe we've got it set up in a way that will serve our communities and our community and our students and families well.
How much does that help with social distancing, and what on the buses are kind of marked out for social distancing?
Right. So at this time, you know, there will be a number of protocol dealing with how the students will ride the bus. The first and most important of that is that they're going to have a mask on, and that won't be negotiable. That has to be required. Because there will be times, if you can just picture a school bus and how you load it and get on and move to the seat, there will be times where distancing can't occur in every single moment. And so we've got to put other protocol in place when distancing can't occur, and so that's what we're doing.
Are there like taped off marked seats? Can only one student sit in the seat? Or
Yeah, you know, at this time I don't have all the details on each route and how they'll handle that, so I'm sorry, I don't know.
what about capacity numbers on a bus?
You know, we've got several different versions of buses. Some of them are regular capacity 72, and they kind of work down from there. You know, some are buses that hold fewer. Some are accessible, and they carry students who are disabled or have a disability of some sort. And so all of that has been worked through on each of the different types of buses that we have, so that we can transport them safely. I can't speak to each scenario, however.
You mentioned having fewer students in the building allows for more social distancing.
Yeah.
Are you guys staggering hallway passing times too? I mean, I'm sure you've seen that photo of a Georgia high school that
I have.
went around.
Yes, I have, and you know, where possible, we've turned hallways into one-way walkways, so that we're limiting students and staff crossing each other in a hallway. But where not possible, because not every architectural element that we have will allow for that, we're doing everything we can to limit those that are in the hallway. You know, we aren't creating a separate bell schedule for every single class, so that, you know, only one class period's worth of students are in the hallway at a time. But we are doing everything that we can to see to it that we're not packing those hallways with students.
You kind of touched on it a little bit by taking it classroom by classroom or building by building. Kind of a hypothetical question, but what happens if, say, a classroom or buildings, they start to go through that quarantine process and less people are in the classroom? At what point do we call it and say, hey, we have to go back to all virtual?
Yeah, you know, the metrics we're currently watching are the ones I've already outlined, which are the community positivity rate. Also, student attendance is there. But there will be more metrics that we look at, the number of students that we're aware of who have tested positive, or staff members, or those sorts of things. You know, we can move to the hybrid model with a classroom if we had to, but more likely would move to the virtual model, where for a period of a couple of weeks, usually in most cases, we feel this classroom, this grade level, this building needs to learn in the virtual model. But there's no real reason why we would have to necessarily disrupt the entirety of the rest of the district for that. And so that's why, with a 67 square mile district and you know, 15,000 plus students spread out over 20 plus buildings, we will likely bring those students back and then make decisions on a geographical basis based on those metrics.
And the district is prepared with teachers being able to do that, as well as supplies and things for students to go?
We are.
So, question for the parents at home who may be working and may not be prepared to have their kid home more often, or don't know the unknown of, hey, will my kid be sent home all next week and I have to work? Is there anything in place, or is there anything that the district has been thinking about to help the working families that are kind of not prepared? Or
I can't prepare for every possible scenario that you can imagine and suggest to me. Therefore, I can't speak to that specific scenario. But you know, there will likely be times where we have to notify a class that they're, you know, going to be learning from home for the next 10 school days, or maybe 14 days of calendar, and we won't, because of the requirements of the pandemic and the CDC and our local health guidelines, we won't be able to provide childcare in some situations. That situation that you described could occur.
Can you elaborate on how Wednesdays will work in the hybrid plan? Teachers will be in the building all day. Students can come in if they want to. Will teachers also be giving lessons over Zoom? Just describe a typical Wednesday.
Sure. So on a typical Wednesday, I should indicate to you that by the vote of the board, there will likely only be 2 of those.
Yeah, so 2.
Okay, because most Wednesdays will be a day of school with students in the classroom learning in their regular way that we kind of traditionally think of. But for these 2 Wednesdays where we will be in the hybrid model, we have created a schedule where certain students by grade level or subject area can come into the building to receive interventions and supports. The reason we created a schedule was so that we wouldn't have a rush of students coming in the building all in the morning or all in the afternoon. And so let's say first grade's from 9 to 9:30 or second grade's 9:30 to 10 or whatever. And then, of course, that we can schedule around things as well as a part of that. We also want to keep the time open around food service, because while we're not necessarily delivering direct in-person instruction to all students on Wednesdays, we are delivering food. We are providing food for all families who come to get that food on Wednesdays. And so we've got to have the building available and serving meals. If I remember correctly, last week we passed 500,000 meals that have been served since we started this pandemic. And so that's obviously a really important part to our community. Families who can't get their child or can't themselves come to the school to receive the supports and interventions can work out in a separate plan individually with their building principal or that teacher themselves, whether that be a phone call, a communication that's digital in some form or another, and that will happen. I also want to acknowledge, though, that on those Wednesdays, part of our plan, which has approval from the Department of Education, is to deep clean those buildings. Again, I only suspect this will happen for a couple of weeks, maybe 3 at the most, but that we will use that time to make certain that the building's ready for the next group of students to come the next day.
So just a clarification, so students who do not seek the services in the building on Wednesday, they will still be learning online, teachers will still be conducting some sort of a lesson? In the hybrid model, for the 2 weeks that we're in the hybrid model, the teachers will deliver instruction and give, for lack of a better term, assignments or instructional opportunities, homework, if you will, to students to complete while they're not in the school. And so, yes, there will be academic items covered on those Wednesdays.
How difficult has it been kind of reading through some of these questions that us and the public has, and what are some of the challenges the district has faced in kind of answering them?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that question. It's been an interesting time. You know, when this started back in March for us here in Sioux City, it seemed everything was changing every hour, every couple of hours. And then we moved to a time where it was every day or a couple of days. Now it feels as though it's changing every week or a couple of weeks. And so you're asking me very specific questions, rightfully so, that's your job, about what's going to happen more than a week from now. And I'm giving you the best answers that I have, but I have always asked our community to be flexible with us, give us some grace and patience. And we're telling the community members, we're sharing that with them as well, that flexibility, that grace and patience. If somebody dives into the educational process, hybrid or in person, or maybe they chose to be a virtual learner and they get into that for a couple of weeks and they decide, you know, this wasn't what we thought it was, it's not working for us, we'll work with you. We want to serve your students, and we want to serve them in the way that helps you the most. And so obviously we can't have kids moving from hybrid to virtual, back to traditional to virtual, you know, on a weekly or daily basis. But as families figure out what works best for them, we're here to serve them, and so we want to do everything we can. And we certainly ask for their grace and patience with us in return.
Right. And,
Go ahead.
and you say, of course, it is in everyone's, you know, desire to serve everyone, right? We want to help and serve the parents,
certainly.
but there's only so much a district can do, especially going back to the working families. It's just something that I've heard a lot in the community, a lot of concerns that they've had is it can help the parents and the families who may have students who are more susceptible to getting it, you know, doing virtual. They have
Right.
that decision to do that.
Right.
But for the parents that need their kids in the classroom because they can't afford childcare,
Right.
I know you said the district says they can't provide that, but is the district at all thinking or maybe working with families to kind of help them out in any way, or is that something that you guys could possibly do?
Well, you know, I believe that's why the board made the decision they did, to start for a period of no less than 2 weeks and no more than 3 weeks in the hybrid model to transition into the school year, to slowly use that 2 or 3 week period to transition in. but then to bring the students back into the model that we know it, with the only exception being those classrooms or buildings maybe that are dealing with severe outbreaks of the coronavirus. During that 2-week period, are we offering childcare separate from the instructional process? No, we are not.
It's taken some long nights, maybe some arguments, a lot of conversation though, but just in your opinion, just how excited are you to finally get the school year going with the plans that you guys have in place?
Yeah, you know, right, we had summer school the last couple of weeks, and we had thousands of students in the district. I mean, even when we've only got, you know, a couple of thousand, 3,000 students in the district, that's still one of the larger districts in the state of Iowa. And it gave us the ability to prepare to deliver this in the right way. But it was really obvious when we saw those kids after, you know, nearly 5 months of what ended up being a summer break of 5 months that we're here to serve them. We want to serve them and their families. Our staff members had all kinds of excitement being back together. We've got our staff members back in the district now as we begin to work to get ready for the first days of school next week. And I'm so proud of our staff for the learning that they're doing, the ways they're growing digitally to deliver digital instruction, because it's very likely that most staff members will have to, at some point or another, deliver something virtually, and we need to be ready for that. And so I'm proud of them for that work. I'm excited to be able to serve our families in this community. You know, Sioux City has had a history of rising up when there's been a challenge. If we're talking about a flood, if we're talking about a plane crash, if we're talking about a, you know, significant other weather event. And we have been no different through this novel coronavirus, this pandemic, as we've worked together to serve one another. And it has been a lot of late nights and a lot of passionate perspectives offered on this item or that item. Should we be in this instructional model? Should we wear masks or not? And I understand that everybody has their own opinion and perspective. But I'm really thankful that we as Sioux Cityans are going to come together. We're going to use the model that the board has decided, and we're going to start serving kids.
Does the school district need to request a waiver if it wants to move hybrid beyond the 2 weeks?
No. No, by hybrid was your question, if I think
Yeah,
I
if they want to
understood
move
that.
hybrid beyond
Yeah,
the 2 weeks,
the-
does it need a state waiver?
As I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I don't have all of their documentation in front of me, we have the ability to move in and out of the hybrid and traditional systems without the participation or the permission of the Iowa Department of Public Health and the Iowa Department of Education, other than I will tell you that we communicated thoroughly with the Department of Education on our version of the hybrid model, because we wanted to make certain it counted for instruction and that the state would give us that level of approval, and they did.
It's been known that
That's the all online that requires that extra
That is correct. If we,
level of scrutiny from the department.
that is right. If we were going to move the district, I want to be clear about that, to the all virtual model, if I felt it was necessary to close, let's just use an example, you know, one of our high schools or middle schools for a period of 2 weeks and move to virtual instructions during that 2-week period, that can be done locally and without the consultation with the Department of Ed. But if we were going to close the district for a period of, let's say, 2 months, because we really felt like it was the right thing to do, we would need their permission in order to be able to count the days toward instruction, as explained by the governor in her most recent press conference related to that topic.
So to clarify, you can do like a certain buildings or a middle school or high school, but for the entire district, you need the Department of Ed.
Would you mind one more
If
time?
you want to close down, go virtually for 2 weeks for one high school or one middle school, we can do that locally.
That's correct.
Got it.
That's correct. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't quite understand.
No, that's
I
okay. That was my
apologize.
question.
Yeah.
It's been known that younger children are less likely to be affected by COVID. They may not have as much symptoms.
Right.
Are we relying on parents, if they get it, or people at home, if they get it, to contact the school and say, hey, I have it?
Absolutely. Yeah. While we understand that the youngest children may have statistically less negative repercussions of either transmitting or carrying or having the virus, we do suspect that, you know, based on our most recent knowledge, that transmission can happen. And the students are around adults all the time while in the district. I'm not talking about their family members, I'm talking about our staff members. We care very much for our staff members and need to do everything we can to keep them safe. And getting through a pandemic of this nature, even if it were just a Sioux City item, but let's be clear, it's not only that, it's a state item, a national item, and a global pandemic. we are going to have to be good citizens. We're going to have to work with one another. And so, of course, anytime any student or parent or member of the family tests positive, we certainly hope that they'll share that information with us.
So of the students who will be going all online, my understanding is that families can elect that if we want this for our child or child wants, they sign up for that. So
That's correct, yes.
And the last time, I think a few months ago, when you gave an update on that, maybe the school board meeting was about 20%. Ultimately, it came out to 30%.
Yeah, we're at 28 yesterday, I think 28%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you just, I'm not looking for a percentage, but is it mostly high school, mostly middle school, mostly?
Yeah, we've studied those numbers, Brett, and the numbers have been surprising because we thought they might come from certain sections of town or certain grade levels, and they have not. They're really widespread. Students in buildings on all, Sioux City is so particular about their west, east, and north sides of town. Students from all sides of town, students from all grade levels and subject matter. And so we do have a pretty widespread. There will be, our virtual schooling will be, several thousand students, which is one of the largest districts in Iowa just in a virtual model. We're asking that they commit to that for a period of time and not just switch back and forth, switch at the quarter if they're going to switch, the educational quarter, if you will. And I'm really proud of our staff members who have gone through the extra training this year to be ready to deliver that.
So while you say it's spread, through lots of all sides of town, is it safe to say it's more older students?
Mm-mm.
No?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it really is spread out.
okay.
Yeah.
So elementary, middle school.
Yeah, and you're correct at the way you asked the question. I can't quote statistics, but there are students at all grade levels who will be learning virtually. Yeah.
Okay.
So you want the students to commit for at least a quarter. Are the teachers who are part of the virtual model, are they expected to commit all year?
Yeah, they will teach in the virtual model all year unless, I have to keep open in every answer I give you that something unforeseen could occur. But yes, we're expecting our teaching staff who will be running this virtual model to be in that model all year long.
And you said that percentage of teachers was pretty even to the percentage of students, or the numbers itself?
The numbers were enough to suffice, because if you think about the virtual model, students, if the student's going to a traditional school day, they're in the building for about 7.5 hours. If they're in the virtual model, they're not in front of a teacher or that teacher for 7 or 7.5 hours a day every day. So the amount of instruction is very similar, and the amount of work is very similar. But the teachers who are teaching virtually can see a few more students because they're going to have that broken up in different ways. Just as we have had to reinvent ourselves to teach virtually, we have to reinvent our mindset that education is only delivered in a certain way with a teacher in the front of the classroom of students. Yes, we're moving to a virtual model where a virtual teacher is in front of a virtual classroom full of students, but the way in which they deliver that can be sliced a little differently, and so that's what we're doing.
When I spoke to Siouxland District Health yesterday, I touched on summer sports with him, and because he mentioned that the bulk of positive cases that he saw from students and that have been integrated into those sports programs came
Right.
from what students did during their off time. So is that a worry or concern at all for you guys as a district, that students or parents that need to educate their student and say, you should stay at home, you shouldn't be going out with your friends and stuff like that?
Yeah, this is a concern for all of us. I think it should be a concern for our community that, we've even noted it from some of the collegiate conversations that I've heard in the media lately that it may not be the academia that's causing any outbreaks and or certainly significant outbreaks. It may be what's happening in the off time. And so while we're excited to get back to school in some model, while we're excited to offer sports or athletics, if you will, arts and activities in some model, I think we still need to remind one another we're in a global pandemic. And things must look and feel different if we're going to make it through this with as little interruption as possible. People should understand that if we end up with football games, and we plan that right now, that coming to sit at a football game and watch what's going on is going to look and feel different. Going to a marching band event will look and feel different. And so we're asking for people's participation in this and communication in this, just as we're asking for their grace.
In a normal year, substitute teachers are always needed, and
Right.
this time in a global pandemic, what's the situation look like for the district now? Is there enough substitute teachers, and what's kind of the district doing to kind of fill the gap, say someone gets sick and a substitute is needed?
Right, one of the things we've done a couple of months ago was begin surveying our substitute teaching ranks to see what availability we would maintain with them. It's not uncommon for a substitute teacher to be a retired educator or other professional. And we understand that the vulnerability of the population after retirement can be more significant, so we want to be very careful about that. We believe we have robust numbers, not only of teachers who are willing to do a traditional substitute role, but we now have a new situation where we've got this virtual schooling that's going on, and the virtual teacher teaching her virtual classroom. Now, all of our virtual instructors are going to be in our buildings. They're going to be delivering instruction from our buildings. The students who are learning virtually likely are going to be at their home or some other place. But we've got to have teachers who can come in and do the substitute role in the building in the virtual model. And so we've offered opportunities for people to grow in that realm as well. And we believe, as I talk to you right now, that we have enough substitute teachers to get us through this period of time.
I wanted to ask kind of an overarching
Sure.
question for the last one.
Yeah.
And there's been so many things that you have done to communicate to the public from basically the beginning of March when this all
Right.
happened on that Sunday night on the 12th.
Yeah.
Or 15th, I guess.
Yeah.
And then all this stuff, school board meetings throughout, and then interviews with you throughout, and you mentioned at one point you thought there might be a second wave coming in the fall.
Mhm.
From how things were, I know this is a really hard question, but from
That's okay.
how things were in March, how things tracked in April, May, when the restaurants were closed down, theaters were closed down, et cetera. Does the level of coronavirus that is present right now when school starts in August, is it higher than what you would have thought back then?
No. You know, you and I did a long interview over at the building there that day. And the way I envisioned it at that time and the way I envision it today is a little different. And I think that can be found in the answers that I gave about the length of time we're going to be in this hybrid model, 2, maybe 3 weeks before we open for traditional instruction, so long as the metrics stay low, because we're running about a 6 or 7% positivity metric in Woodbury right now. Plymouth is a little higher than that right now. I haven't looked yet today. But as long as those metrics stay low and students and families communicate to us that they want to keep coming into the building, not those who are learning virtually, but the other students, I think we'll see our district open. And I think we'll see our district likely remain open in a number of places or most places while we more surgically deal with outbreaks of the virus. Where, you know, when you and I originally discussed this, Brett, I think we were talking about, you know, the district opening and then having to close again entirely and then opening again and then having to close again entirely. I sense that we're going to have to be more nimble than that. And as a good partner to the parents, guardians of children, community members, those in the workforce, and the students themselves, you know, if there's a classroom on the far east or west or north side that needs to be closed, we're not going to think about that very long. That will be closed, and we will communicate with all that need that they need to quarantine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we should shut the entirety of the district down as long as our metrics are staying where we are now. And so I do feel like it will be a little different as I talk to you now. You know, if you ask me again in another month, I'll probably give you a different answer. Yeah.
Anything else that you want to add?
I just have one last
Yeah.
question.
Mhm.
As far as the timeline goes, what can we expect things to, or how long can we expect things to be shut down? Say, for example, the first 2 weeks, no less than 2 weeks, no more than 3 weeks. Say a building gets shut down, our classroom, what are we expecting, 2 weeks as well? Or?
Yeah, in most cases, you know, we as many of your stations or agencies have reported, you know, we've had an occasion where an individual was either close to somebody that tested positive or tested positive for the novel coronavirus. And in most cases like that, when we work with Siouxland District Health, we're working on a period of quarantine of 10 to 14 days, and it's dependent upon when a test was administered, when the results of those tests were found, what the contact tracing would indicate, are there symptoms or not, those sorts of things. And so it's not, I feel like I've kind of evaded some of the specificity you've asked in your questions with my answers, but I can't be specific about every scenario. It would most likely be in the range of 2 weeks, though.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
I had one more
Yeah, please.
Sorry. With what may or may not be happening with the vaccine, which at one point was maybe for, late 2020, and now I'm hearing more of like February, March.
Yeah,
perhaps.
that's what I'm reading as well.
Do you anticipate that second semester could be easier, so to speak, with all this than the first semester?
It'll just be different. We'll be better at handling this. By the time we get to second semester, we'll be better at handling the social distancing and the comfort of transportation and food service and being around one another with masks on. Our staff and students will be better at teaching and learning virtually than we are today. We'll learn best practices from our colleagues just like they will from us as we work our way through this. Certainly we hope and pray for a vaccine to have accessibility to our community, because once that comes into play, I think that gets us more close to what we thought of as normal before. But I suspect this will change us as an organization for a long time. Ways in which we'll change would include the fact that we can teach virtually to families that need virtual instruction. Whether that's a student in a pandemic or not who has a need for that, we can do that in better ways after this is done, after this pandemic is over. We'll be able to deliver virtual instruction instead of staying home on a snow day or an inclement weather day, so that we can count that as a day of instruction, and that'll change who we are a bit. But I do suspect that some other things will change over time, the way in which we deliver the arts, the way in which we do our athletics that you've asked about. Different sports occur in the spring. I'm trying to answer your question. Different sports occur in the spring than in the fall, and our behavior will have to be a little different there. It'll be an interesting walk. I'm thankful that we're able to navigate this with our 2,500 member staff. I'm really proud of our staff, whether that be a teacher or an administrator. I'll even count the school board in that. Obviously, they're not staff members; they're elected officials. But transportation and food service staff have truly been the frontline essential workers of this district since March 13. And they have served our students and families in ways that would have challenged us for a long time. Finally, I'd just say that we lost a lot of instruction. From March 13 until we start up again on April 25th, we've lost a lot of instruction. And I'm proud of our teaching staff, because they're going to assess the needs of those kids and get them caught up as quickly as they can. But again, we have to ask for patience as we work towards success together.
I have one last question as well.
Sure.
For the first 2 weeks in the hybrid model, if teachers are in the building on Wednesdays, but very few to no students show up, how does this help the district meet that 50% requirement?
Again, you've asked me questions about the Department of Ed, and I think it would be a great idea for you to talk with them. We have presented our plan to the Department of Education, and they've given us permission to use this. And this is a plan we intend to use for a couple of weeks, maybe 3 at the most.
So you can't say why? They didn't give you an explanation why?
I don't have any of that documentation in front of me right now. We are opening our schools to students and families for support, intervention, and services on those Wednesdays. And so that is a service they can receive. They'll also be coming in to receive nutrition on those days. That'd be lunch and breakfast for the following day. And so that's, at this point in time, we have been assured that our model meets their requirement.
Katie, we didn't gather documentation for the questions you're asking because the focus of the interview today was about our health and safety.
Yeah, no worries. I'll follow up.
Okay?
All right, thanks
Thank you.
everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. I appreciate you being here helping us tell our story.